I got all I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Marriage is the best. Well, we made it through another week, and we are back, and I am excited to be recording today's episode. I'm excited because I really like the idea of marriage and development and just trying to figure out, what does that mean? What does it look like? In fact, my strategy this week for kind of working this through was to discuss such things with my children. Basically, just as a sounding board to kind of get the ideas verbalized rather than have them be participants in the discussion. But it was very interesting to watch because one of them listened and said nothing and continued to work on a drawing she was working on, which was great. And the other one truly and thoughtfully engaged and asked some questions, and it was very sweet. So I was encouraged by that. We are going to get into phase 3 of the marriage stages or phases today, and I would like to remind you really quickly that we do have a $100 giveaway going on right now for you to win a date night. And so if you're interested in doing that, all you have to do is go on to the Apple Podcast app, find our show, Marriage is the Best. The little picture for Marriage is the Best is different on the Apple Podcast app than it is on Spotify. They, for whatever reason, when I updated it, it didn't update on both platforms. So I have to go back and figure out how to do that. But we had a generous listener who wanted to sponsor a giveaway, and so we are doing said giveaway. And if you want to get a $100 cash prize for a date night for you and your spouse or significant other, we would be blessed to give that to you, and we would love a 5-star review. We also would like you to, in order to kind of identify who people are and make sure that we're being fair and getting it to the right place, we would like you to, if we're unable to identify you on Apple Podcast, if you could also just leave a comment on the episode 63 on Spotify with your information or like a sentence that you used in your review. That way, the only reason that we're doing that is so that we can identify whose review goes to which person. On Apple, when you sign up and leave a review, you can kind of leave a review with any name and it has nothing to do with who you are. And so that can make it difficult to identify whose is whose. So that's the reason that posting on both platforms makes it a little easier. If we can identify you or you have left reviews in the past and you are fairly identifiable, that's great. And we would love to provide you your prize. So we do currently have 2 entries, and we're excited about that. We went from 1 5-star review on Apple to 3. So we're really, well, that's a written review. We currently have 8 5-star reviews, but anyways, so we would love for you to participate in that. If you have a moment and you want to think of a witty way to review our podcast and throw on there that you like us and that you think other people would too, that would be great. So let's get into marriage phase 3. Marriage phase 1 being honeymoon, marriage phase 2 being this idea of disillusionment or the falling out of the honeymoon process. We talked last time about some of the pitfalls, the idea surrounding engaging in regular conflict that allows you to move through some of the struggles that come up as a result of the honeymoon phase fading away. And we talked through how that conflict is very necessary for you to provide or for you to establish healthy rhythms that allow for continued conflict moving into the future. And so if we're talking about almost like a chronological phase in the relationship, we're talking about you have moved through disillusionment. You are now fully aware of the limitations of your partner. You're fully aware of some of the things that rub you the wrong way, some of the things that you thought were cute that are no longer. You're fully aware of the breakdown of who this person is, and, you're hopefully more aware of their strengths just as much as You're aware of their weaknesses. You've moved through either entering into conflict regularly about the early relational, relationally required conversations, such as who spent more money, or who didn't take care of a bill, who didn't take care of a credit card, who is in charge of chores, how do they get done. You've moved through all sorts of different logistics conversations, as well as, can you not chew like that? Can you not lean on me like that? Can you not fill in the blank? You've moved through the things being, becoming more and more real in your relationship, as opposed to that fantastical mindset that we talked about in the honeymoon phase. There's a literal kind of psychotic episode that happens, a mini psychotic episode, that is basically represented in you thinking so ridiculously highly and so affectionately and so attractively toward this other person that it hijacks your brain, and you're not really thinking clearly or not really connected to the reality of who this person is. You're impassioned, you're enthralled, you're super excited, and you're moving in through that. And that's good. You know, we talked about how that was like, it's not a bad thing that you would fall in love, that you would fall in puppy love, kind of this early affection, and that you would commit to this person based on your experience of this early relationship phase. You know, it increases commitment. It kind of inspires people to move toward their spouses. And it's an important kind of phase of the relationship. Obviously, it doesn't always happen within the marriage, but but there is a season within the, like, even after you say I do, that you get this kind of honeymoony phase. Now, you can also experience this honeymoony phase and the disillusionment and really all of these phases, even if you choose not to get married. The married part of that really comes down to, you have expressed an explicit, legal, binding contract of commitment to this person, and you and they know where you stand and that you are going to continue to pursue them moving forward for a very long time. Without the married part of that, there is a question surrounding commitment, surrounding other parties, surrounding expectations, surrounding living with each other, surrounding children, surrounding a lack of commitment and what that means for the future. Now, I've worked with tons of couples who have started this out in many, many different ways. And so it's not as though you can't do the work. The work is kind of similar or same no matter how you're moving through some of the stages. But I think there are certain things that make the stages easier, lighter. They make it less complicated, make it more likely for you to find success, etc. So there are just certain principles that will help it work better. And I think the actual physical, legal, literal, whatever you want to call it, marriage is one of those things that is helpful, especially in today's day and age when relationships and dating are such a flippantly entered into and moved through phenomenon. So marriage, the marriage part of marriage is the best. The actual, legal thing is, I think, an important part. And when I talk to couples about moving from engagement or kind of not being married into being married, everybody says that they didn't expect it to change the way that it felt to be in a relationship, and it does. And so they notice that. Bex and I noticed that. Lots of people notice that. And if you didn't notice that, there probably is, there's probably a reason for that. But ultimately, I think it is, for the vast majority of people, an important part of the steps. So we're going to call phase 3 teamwork. It's kind of a working title for the phase because either the team works or it really doesn't work. And there are lots of different things that make the teamwork part of the phase 3 either really good or really bad. So as we're thinking about the end of the disillusionment phase and moving into the next phase, kind of an evolvement or a maturity out of it, what we would like to see is that because you worked so diligently on your systems and rhythms of connection in your disillusionment phase, you are finding increased intimacy, increased connection, increased attunement to the reality of who this person is, where your attraction and the fulfillment of your attraction in the early stages of the relationship is based on chemicals and a disconnect from reality. What we would like to see in the teamwork phase is that your attunement and your connection and your attraction and in your relationship is now more based on the reality of who this person is. That you're starting to see their strengths as beautiful and their weaknesses as beautiful parts of them, right? That we're not demonizing or disconnecting from or coming down on our spouses because of their weaknesses. You have a system or a rhythm both of connection and of working through conflict. And so as life and stress bring about challenges, you have a model for moving through challenging things. You know how to talk about intimacy in different seasons because you did the work to understand how to talk about intimacy. You know how to talk about finances when finances get really tight. You're able to communicate about that. You know how to get through all of these different challenges and stresses and work together as a team through the ups and the downs and the difficulties of the different phases of the relationship. The phase 2, the disillusionment phase, sets the tone. It sets you up for success or failure in this phase 3 of teamwork. So if you've done the work, you get to benefit from the work. If you've done the work, if you've had the conversations, if you have said the hard things that needed to be said, hey, I'm uncomfortable with XYZ in your family, and that's making me feel XYZ, and I'm feeling alone in that, and I don't want to feel alone. It feels really crummy in our relationship. That's a conversation you might have in your disillusionment phase as you're getting to know the reality of your partner's family and the dysfunction therein. And then you have that conversation 1, 2, 3, 4 times throughout the disillusionment phase, right? And all of a sudden, that conversation transforms. It transforms from, I don't really understand. I don't really like what you're saying. I don't really want what you're saying to be true because I like my family the way that they are, and that feels judgmental, or that feels bad, or that doesn't feel good to me. You go from that defensive, normal, reasonable kind of defensive response early on in that disillusionment phase to a softening over time. Conversation number 2, conversation number 3, conversation number 4. You start to see. We talk about the Shuka model. If you want to check that one out, the Shuka model is seen, heard, understood, known. And so when you hear where your partner is coming from, you see them in that, you understand how the family is impacting them, and you know them deeply in how they're experiencing things, how they're moving through things, how they're feeling. when you're able to put all of that together and really shuka it, really, really understand it and know it, then all of a sudden your responses change from I'm defensive because my family is really important to me and you are being XYZ, right? Like disrespectful or unreasonable or fill in the blank, whatever we want to label their experience of it, to I'm okay. So you are uncomfortable with Uncle Joe and his expressions of affection or, some of his jokes, and you want me to understand that and know that and not participate in it when he's kind of going down that track. And that would feel loving to you, and that would make you feel seen and heard and understood. And so because I love you and because I'm committed to you and because I want this relationship of ours, this marriage of ours, to grow from phase 2 into phase 3, because I want to mature us from phase 2 into phase 3, I'm willing to accept that influence from you more and more and more. And that's where the teamwork phase kind of comes into play. In the disillusionment phase, you're not really willing to change the things that need to be changed, to see the person, because we interpret it as coming from a place of control or ill will or unreasonability or they'll get over it or I'm not willing to change that. When that boils down, when the phase of that relationship is resolved and you're able to mature and grow into phase 3, you see those things that they say in a completely different light. And your motivation changes from protecting the old, protecting the families, protecting old ways of doing things, protecting your own weaknesses and failures through defensiveness, right? Your spending habits, your lack of, ability to regulate emotions. You're able to see those things because in the disillusionment phase, your partner is constantly rubbing against your rough edges and it doesn't feel good. It feels icky. It feels difficult. It feels overwhelming at times. It'll spark defensiveness. It'll create loneliness and struggle and criticism. That rubbing is normal. And if we allow our partners to kind of rub down those rough edges and smooth those things out or sharpen our dull parts, then what we're able to do is we're able to move from being disillusioned and the breaking down of the reality into teammates, teamwork. You're able to hear each other better. You have a rhythm of connection. You have a rhythm of communication and conflict. Things don't have to go unsaid. Things don't have to go under the rug. They get dealt with. They get addressed. There are mature apologies made, and you start to really flow in your understanding and in your connection to your partner. And the more that you are seen and heard and understood and known in your relationship and in yourself, your growth and knowledge of yourself, the more intimate and close and connected and team-oriented you feel in your relationship. So that is an expression of what happens when you're moving from disillusionment into teamwork the right way. So what happens when you don't move through the disillusionment phase of the relationship into teamwork the right way? Sometimes I find couples that have found a difficult topic in their disillusionment phase. It gets gridlocked, it gets stuck within their relationship. And then it slowly tears and eats away at the nature of the relationship. When we talk through conflict and we talk through probably defensiveness and shame, and we talked through a lot of the stuff last year, throughout 2025, we talked often about the Gottman's discovery of unresolvable conflicts. And an unresolvable conflict, just to refresh your memory, is something that is there at the beginning of the relationship or not necessarily at the beginning of the relationship, but something that is there in the relationship that remains difficult, remains conflicted over the course of the relationship long term. So I've given the example in the past of Becca and my early stuff. We had hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations about faithfulness and connection and anxiety and feelings and insecurity. And we talked about those issues. Oh, and then coldness and emotional disconnection, or the way that we were talking about and treating one another. So we have had and do continue to have many, many, many conversations around these kind of core concepts, core topics. The reason that they come up is because I am broken in a certain area just as an individual, and my wife is broken in a certain area as an individual. And those broken parts of us, they don't fit together perfectly, like the jagged edges of a vase, right? So if you are a broken vase, half of one, and they are a broken vase, they don't come together perfectly. No relationship has ever done that. Instead, they come together and then there's huge cracks. There's these big cracks, holes in the vase. The vase is still beautiful. The vase is still valuable. The vase is still great. But there are these cracks. The cracks don't change because the cracks are created by you in your nature being you and them in their nature being them. In order to change the cracks, you would have to change who you married. You would have to change the person. And the person is not going to change. Now, certain things aren't necessarily cracks, such as excessive drug use, alcohol use, marijuana use, porn use, other addictions. Those are more behavioral issues and struggles. They're habit formed. They are very difficult to overcome, but they are not a part of who your partner is, in the sense that those are the unresolvable issues. That those in their nature need to be addressed within your partner. If they're struggling with alcoholism, let's say, they need to go and address the alcoholism within them through treatment or through AA or through whatever, in order to understand themselves and get to the bottom of what's going on within that structure that continues to destroy them consistently via that kind of vice. That is not the unresolvable issue that necessarily comes into the marriage, although it could, the flavor of those things could touch some of the unresolvable issues. What I mean to say is that if someone is struggling with an addiction, that is not a marital issue necessarily, although it will become a marital issue and it will obviously impact the marriage. But the issue lives within the individual, and the individual would need to seek, support for that. And then as the individual sought support and got better and healthier, then the marriage could improve and grow and change and move into the next phase, the phase 3, 4, 5. All that to say, there's these unresolvable issues in your vase and in your relationship. And in the disillusionment phase, those unresolvable issues get touched quite often, and it doesn't feel good. It feels really, really icky, really, really awful to touch these issues. And oftentimes people come out of having those conversations and those dialogues around that with a sense of defeat, because they notice that they are not moving the needle. They're not pulling forward. They're not gaining any ground as they're having these conversations. A lot of that really has to do with the nature of the problem being an unresolvable issue, and not necessarily that you or your spouse or partner are, irreparably broken, and that your marriage will never change or grow or phase up in the relationship sense. Like what the Gottmans found was that the couples who are masters of marriage, mature marriages, find a way to talk about the unresolvable issues without getting defensive, without getting critical, with infusing humor and connection, and understanding that these issues are unresolvable issues made up of who your partner is, all in all their glory, their strengths and their weaknesses. And it acknowledges the reality around that so that you can continue to live healthily and intimately despite the fact that you and your spouse have these unresolvable, deep, difficult dynamics within each of you. I've worked with many couples who have found many different issues that they really struggled to come to terms with. I can think of couples that I've worked with who never established a rhythm of connection around intimacy. They never really talk about it. They didn't never really do the work around it. They just kind of did what they could. They ended up feeling disconnected and far away. They ended up not talking about it when they needed to. And so that kind of created a fading or a rift within the relationship. Now, here's the great thing. If you've done that and you're, mature in your age, but maybe not mature in your phases of your marriage, you have an opportunity today to go back and to have difficult conversations with your spouse and to update your personal response related to that specific topic. So if you're really struggling with, sexual intimacy and you need to talk to your spouse about that so that you guys can work through the rhythms and the questions and establish an understanding that we can talk about this, that it's okay to talk about this, that we can talk about it so that we can get on the same page. We can talk about it so we can be heard and understood. You can update this over time with consistent, appropriate input. Sometimes that is helpful to seek counseling for so that you have a distant third party to kind of coach and help you through doing that. Sometimes that is easier for partners because it's been so long and it might be such a wounded area that you can't necessarily just dive into it. But there is hope in addressing those kinds of issues that have caused trouble and difficulty and pain for you and your spouse over the long run. So when you don't establish a rhythm for talking about difficult marital topics, you give the power to those difficult marital topics to create problems for you moving forward, to create disconnect in your relationship, which creates a difficulty in communicating well, in conflicting well, when you're not feeling connected or not feeling seen and heard and understood and known. That transforms the way that you communicate with your partner, and that makes it very difficult for you to manage the relationship as you grow. If you want to move from disillusionment into teamwork, there are some simple things that will make this better. First and foremost, I would pick up some resources and just do some education for yourself on marriage if you haven't already. If you've done all of them, and I work with couples along the whole spectrum, right? I work with couples who have read all of the things and are still struggling, and I've worked with couples who have read none of the things and are doing fine, and I've worked with everything in between. But if you want to do some psychoeducation, whether it be podcasting or listening, that's great. You can start there. Marriage is a team sport. It really requires both you and your spouse to work on things together. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're actually doing just individual growth and change. Work on yourself, and that's great. If you are so inclined, or if your partner refuses to go to seek some counseling in order to improve and grow and mature your relationship, you can do some of the work just yourself internally on yourself to grow and learn and change and become a healthier and healthier human being so that your part of the relationship can improve. However, improving the marriage relationship requires both people. So if you have a willing spouse who really wants things to get better, they just don't have the tools or they don't have the knowledge, then obviously psychoeducation or counseling, if they're willing, can provide the tools and the knowledge and a rhythm or a system for improving those things over time. If they are not willing, then you can't necessarily attack the marriage, but you can attack what is within you that is impacting the marriage, or just what is within you that needs to grow and be healthy and mature as an individual person. If I were to give you advice, if you're in disillusionment or you've been married for a very long time and there are these like issues that are really they're keeping you from feeling like you're on a good team, I would highly recommend reaching out. I would highly recommend reaching out to Marriage is the Best podcast. So we have an email, marriageisthebest@yahoo.com. If you could give me the details of what's going on in your relationship, and if you would give me an opportunity, give me a chance to speak into your specific situation with your blessing, it very well may be that many people are struggling with your same struggles and would benefit from you sharing. And so if you feel so inclined, I would really encourage you to write in to break down what you're experiencing, some of your, unresolvable conflict, where it started, maybe some of the phase relationship stuff that you're in right now, what you're noticing, what you're seeing. Every marriage is so unique and every situation is so nuanced in its variables that it takes a lot to kind of break down and help people to understand the system that they've created and how to make it better. And so if you would give us that opportunity, we would love to help you to understand and break down and figure out a next step for bringing your relationship up a phase, for building that sense of teamwork into your relationship. And I think next week we're probably going to talk about kids, or we're going to go dive deeper into teamwork. We've kind of been doing a talk about the phase and then talk deeper about the phase rhythm. If you like that, that's great. I don't know if we'll be able to talk deeper about the phase next time, but we may talk about other related phases. So we might talk about like when children coming to play and some of the difficulties of raising children depending on the phase of the relationship that you're in. Because obviously children can come into honeymoon phase, children can come within the disillusionment phase, children can come into a teamwork phase, and also children create their own dynamics within a marriage and create its own phase within itself. And so there's nuance and all sorts of variables. And so we'll talk a little bit about that probably next time. We do have that giveaway. Please go on to Apple Podcasts, leave that 5-star review. That would be fantastic. You'll be entered to win $100, a free date night giveaway thing. It will be super fun. We don't really ever spend $100 on a date night, but we would love that you would. So we think that's really cool and we're excited about it. We do already have 2 on there. So one of those 2 are already going to nail down this prize. But we want you to get in there, get your name in the running. If we could get, a few more on there, that would be such a big blessing. And also it very well may help another person to find our content. If you want to write in, marriageisthebest@yahoo.com. I believe that the email should be in the show notes as well. But we would love for you to write in, let us know what's going on, help us to understand where you're at. And we would love to try and help you out. If you want to write in and you don't want us to talk about you on the air, that's okay. I just can't guarantee that I would have tons of time to be able to correspond, to help. But if I can talk through, instead of writing out, if I can talk through kind of what's going on and ask some, and work through in live setting, then we can kind of work through some of those things. So I would love to do that. That sounds like a blast. It sounds like a fun challenge. It could be a new segment, the newest segment in Marriage is the Best. And so that's all we have for you today. We hope that you had a fantastic week. We are looking forward to continuing to podcast in the new year. If you want to share the podcast or, word of mouth, let other people know that this is going on, we would love that as well. That would be a powerful testimony and would be a blessing as well. So we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Ramble. This is the end.
And I got all I need. And I got